I'm calling to order the Board of Adjustments meeting. This is a special meeting on January 23rd, 2024. Roll call, please.
Ms. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Huval?
Here.
Ms. Bourgeois?
Here.
Mr. Himes? Absent. Ms. Williams? Here.
The third thing on the docket tonight is the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, which was in November, I think?
Yes.
Do I hear any corrections, deletions, or additions to the minutes as presented to the commissioners? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
I make a motion.
I second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Huval?
Yes.
Ms. Bourgeois? Ms. Williams?
Yes.
First case on the docket tonight is 24-01-01 BOA, which was moved from our canceled BOA meeting on January the 8th, requesting variances from Appendix B, Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, Part 3, Use District, Section 3.11, RLL, Single Family Residential Large Lots, 3.1106, Performance Standard Minimum Lot Area not less than 19,600 square feet for all uses. The lot width, a minimum lot width of 140 feet at the building line. Lot depth, a minimum lot depth of 140 feet is required for all lots. To create a lot A1, A2 equaling 19,828.8 square feet and measuring 110.16 by 180. This variance request is in conjunction with a proposed subdivision request to subdivide Lot A14 into Lot A1, A1, and A1, A2, Sections 45T7S, R-11E, Old St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. Said property currently has municipal addresses of 881 Lucy Lane, Covington, Louisiana. The petitioner tonight is Christopher G. Blanchard, who is also the owner, and I think he wants to come up and speak. If you'll step to the mic. Oh, I'm sorry.
Give you a quick staff report. If you look at your zoning, if you look at your re-subdivision map, there's been a slight amendment to that map since the initial application was filed. They have moved the rear lot line, so they now have sufficient square footage to meet the zoning requirements. It is no longer a request for two variances, it's a request solely for a variance on the lot width. So they have 180 feet of lot depth when 140 feet of lot depth is required. They have 110 feet of lot width, but 140 feet is required. I think to aid in your analysis, a little background on the property will be helpful. This property is technically an Old Landing subdivision, or Old Landing, but it is not part of Old Landing subdivision. The reason for that is Hebert Frederick's family, when Old Landing subdivision was developed, retained approximately 10 acres on the river. 5 acres of that 10 acres was given to his son, Hebert Frederick Jr. That 5 acres, more or less, lies to the right of this property. Hebert Frederick Jr. is deceased, but his widow, Dottie Frederick, still lives on the property. The property that's encompassing the property in question, together with the property to the left, was owned by Lucy Frederick Heinz, the Heinz family. Subsequently, the Blanchards obtained lot A1B, and their son eventually obtained lot 1A1. The point of that historical background is that basically this is a family compound at the end of the dead-end public Lucy Lane. All the property surrounding the property requesting the variance is all family property, of which none of the family members have any objection to the variance. So that there's no other public involved except the lot between A1, A2, and Old Landing Road. Everything else is in the family compound at the end of a dead-end road.
Thank you, Rod. Mr. Blanchard, state your name and address, please. For the
Chris
record.
Blanchard,
currently 34 Metairie Court, Metairie, Louisiana, hopefully 881 Lucy Lane, Covington, Louisiana. Thank you, Mr. Rodrigue, for the history. This is fairly simple. We intend to build a house for my aunt that currently lives at 881, and which will enable me and my wife and 2 children to move to Covington in the next few years. The one neighbor that is non-family that would be next door is Mr. Jim Valiant. Mr. Jim is here in support tonight, and happy to answer any questions, but thank you for your consideration.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Pretty straightforward. I went out and looked at it. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. All the commissioners have gone out to look at it. Did Susan Blanchard want to make a comment? No? Okay. And Sam, I'm sorry.
I meant for 02 and 03. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll put you in the stack, okay? All right, I'd like to make a motion that the variance requested is granted. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Huval?
Yes.
Ms. Bourgeois?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Okay, case number 24-01-02 BOA, requesting the Board of Adjustments review the City of Covington's interpretation of the requirements of Section 3.31 of the zoning ordinance and order the city to change its interpretation of same. Subject property/project is a proposed multi-use project located at the corner of Boston Street and North Vermont, Lot 1A, Square 5, Division of St. John, Covington, Louisiana. The petitioner is Fern Hill Development, LLC. Mr. Rodriguez will speak first.
Yeah, I think
Mr. Rodriguez will
it's
speak
important
first.
that the Board of Adjustments know why we are here, because in my 30 years of being city attorney, this is the
Wait,
first
I'm sorry.
time we've had-
I'm sorry. This is considered like a judicial, the code says this is considered like a judicial,
I'm going to tell
review.
you why you're here.
and I was not expecting not to be able to make my case before
But you're going
the
to
city.
speak, you're going to speak afterwards. Mr. Rodriguez speaks first, and then
Unlike the previous variance that you granted, which is the normal process that you go through, another statutorily granted power to the Board of Adjustments is to hear appeals from decisions of the planning board or the building inspector, where you can determine whether or not they properly interpreted the code. In this case, the interpretation made by the planning department is an interpretation of an overlay district, and the historic overlay district is the particular overlay district involved. To understand the approach to that, you need some basic understanding of the overlay district. The overlay district provisions say that the regulations of the underlying district shall govern except where additional uses are expressly permitted. To understand that, you have to know that the underlying district of the historic district overlay in downtown is a CBD, Community Business District zoning. The next language of the historic district that's of importance to you is the language that says, it is not the intent of this ordinance to automatically grant exceptions to maximum density, and that the city may require reasonable conditions to the design factor. Now, when the city planning office and the city building inspector reviewed the plan, the plans are for a commercial residential project on one 25,300 square foot lot. When you look at the historic district multifamily use. The historic district overlay says all permitted residential uses in RM2 multifamily as per the RM2 section. The RM2 section provides that you can have one multifamily unit per 3,500 square feet of property. If you divide the lot in question by 3,500 square feet, it is determined that you can have 7 units. The proposed project has 16 units. The historic district overlay also says that retail establishments shall not exceed 5,000 square feet. The project calls for retail establishments of 6,500 square feet. When the planning department reviewed the project and compared it to these two requirements for density, they made a determination that because the project exceeded the permitted residential density by 2.5 times of the max, and the commercial use exceeded the permitted commercial use by 25%, they did not believe they unilaterally had the authority to approve the project. The reasonable, in their opinion, course of action for the applicant to take was to apply for a planned use development zoning classification. A planned unit development zoning classification allows the applicant to tailor-make the permitted uses of their parcel of property and have those uses specifically reviewed by the zoning commission and the city council. They are the ultimate determiners of the permitting of these excessive densities to be permitted on that piece of property. The planning department did not say they did not want the project to go forward. They said the nature of the project is too intense for us to unilaterally make that decision. When the PUD zoning request was suggested to the applicant, they in fact filed for a PUD. The PUD was on the agenda at the December zoning commission meeting. However, at the meeting, the zoning request was pulled by the applicant. And instead, the applicant chose to appeal the decision of the the planning board, the planning department, that required the PUD to be considered. So what is before you tonight is whether or not the planning department correctly interpreted the the historic district overlay zoning classification to require additional review before the project can be permitted, or whether the project is in compliance with the HDC overlay. That's why you are here. You're not for the project, you're not against the project, you are to make a determination whether the procedures and interpretation of the planning staff were correct.
Thank you. I think that is somewhat correct.
State your name and
I'm
address.
sorry. Lisa Condrey Ward. My address is 449 South America Street. And I'm also here this evening, and they've signed a card should they want to, or should you have any questions of them, two of the architects for one of the projects, Peter Trapolin and Margita Rogers. So I think that you just heard the problem. The problem is they looked at the base zoning and did not apply the changes that the overlay made to that base zoning. So, I want to give you also a little bit of history before I have a PowerPoint where you can actually see these projects, and we'll walk through what I believe is the correct analysis under this code. I started the Square 5 project, which is the one across Boston Street, in 2017. I hired Historical Concepts. They have offices in New York and Atlanta. They do work all over the country. They are planners and architects. And I hired them because their expertise is very particular in historic districts and in historic communities, creating something that blends well, that fits into the community. The first thing that we did, of course, as any architect does, is you look at the zoning. What can I draw? And I'm saying to them, I think a mixed use is what I want, retail and commercial. So we go through the code, and they got it. There's building height requirements, there's parking requirements, et cetera, et cetera. There was nothing about this code that they had any questions about, or were confused about, or needed any information from the city. It is a very straightforward, well-written ordinance. It's been in place since 2010 as a result of very lengthy process that involved anybody in this community that wanted to participate. I went to charrettes, I went to the meetings because it was a comprehensive rezoning. And the purpose of that was to build on what exists. We have a vibrant, historic district that at the time in 2010 had lots of mixed use already in it, things way more dense than what I am proposing. So the whole goal, and the ordinance tells you what its intent and purpose and goal is, and it is to make a more dense downtown that is walkable and pedestrian-friendly, and everything written in that code goes in that direction. And we followed it to the letter, with some to spare. My background, besides owning the Southern Hotel and being a lawyer, I'm a real estate developer. In my 37 years of practice, I've handled zoning cases, land use cases. I'm very familiar with the rules of interpretation that are required for zoning ordinances. They're a little bit different than just a straight-up statute because it's interactive. One builds on the other. And you have to interpret them in the proper sequence. I've also, for the last few years, been the president of the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation. Obviously, it's a statewide nonprofit that is focused on historic preservation. As part of our mission, we provide assistance to individuals, communities, cities, towns, to help them protect their historic districts through zoning, and also allow them to grow those districts responsibly and in a way that is cohesive at the end of the day. So I've had more experience than just reviewing this code and felt very confident from day one that me and my teams and various architects, probably a dozen, have accurately understood what we were supposed to be doing. So there's two projects at issue here. The summer house on the corner of Gibson and New Hampshire is the expansion of the hotel. It is the one that has been through fire marshal, and we were waiting for a building permit when I was told we weren't going to get it because we had to completely rezone. The other project is across Boston Street from the hotel, Square 5. Both of these, this project is retail on the bottom and two buildings connected by walkways with some green space on the first floor. And between those two buildings, there are 16 condos. Obviously, both of these are mixed use. That's not a word that I'm just using to describe the obvious. That's a term of art. That's a word that has specific meaning in this ordinance, and it has specific meaning in any zoning ordinance. We're not the only place that has lots of mixed use. The detail on these projects, at the end of the day, Summer House is 34,823 total square feet. On the first floor, there's a small bakery, there's a men's retail, there's the hotel gift shop, and then hotel amenities like a lobby and rooms. On the second floor, there's 25 hotel guest rooms, and on the third floor, there's 7 condos. This is on 3 lots, and the total lot square footage is 17,400. I have 23 parking spaces, meet the height requirements, meet the parking requirements, meet the land, everything, except that according to them, I can only have 4 condos instead of 7. And that I can only do 10,000 square feet of commercial. How am I going to build a hotel with 10,000 square feet? The other project is 32,000 altogether, and on a larger lot, 25,000 square foot lot, there's 20 parking spaces, height requirements, all that's satisfied. And to put these in context, the hotel, the Southern Hotel, is 41,000 square feet. So that gives you some idea of the scale of this. Both of these projects went through the Historic District Commission twice. I took them to the commission when I had a lot of the detail to say, hey, any issues? Is there anything here that causes you pause or concern about the direction that I'm headed? In every instance, we were granted approval to go forward. And one of the things, I'm on the Historic District Commission, of course I recuse myself for those, but one of the things we look at is scale and rhythm. Neither one of these projects caused the Historic Commission any issues related to how big they were, you know, the density, how much of the lot area was taken, none of that. We were approved. I think that when I got word, this was in December, all of a sudden that there was a problem with the Square 5. That's the one that's not the hotel one, it's across the street. And Andrew McEver with McMath Construction, McMath is going to be the contractor for that one. And Andrew said, hey, the city says you can't build this, you have to rezone. I'm like, no. What, have they changed the zoning? And no. So, but in the meantime, Rod says you need to get a PUD, that's going to take time to get on the agenda. And I kept saying, no, this is a mistake. Just get on the agenda and we'll work it out, because we got a dual track going. I said, sure, we're going to work this out because there's no way. So I sat down with them to try to understand, what are you talking about? And they were applying the rules in the CBD, the base zoning only, with no consideration of how those rules have been impacted and changed by the overlay. Both these properties are zoned CBD with the HDC overlay. There are a few properties in CBD on the very edges of CBD that don't have the overlay. Just a few, a handful. I would say 2% of the total CBD area is without the overlay. For any project that's done on those lots, you would only look to CBD. Overlay has nothing to do with them. But it does have everything to do with mine. So I'm going to start with the conclusion of where we ended up and what should apply. Oops. These are the controlling applicable zoning requirements. I, again, am mixed use. Mixed use does not exist in the CBD-based zoning. In CBD-based zoning, if you have a building or a piece of land, you have the right to say, do I want a house or do I want commercial? And you get to pick. You're not limited. But you do not have the option of saying, I want both. The overlay gives you that option. That's why it's called a historic downtown Covington mixed-use overlay. It's a different animal. It changes things. And what it specifically changed here is that for lot area, there is no minimum lot area required for non-residential, including mixed use. That's it. The 3,500 square foot rule in CBD applies to residential. It does not apply to me. One sentence is all anybody needs to read to understand I don't have that limitation. If I decided tomorrow or 10 years from now to convert the hotel and the commercial in that one building to 100% condos, now I am a residential. I'm no longer mixed use. I'm residential. The overlay says if I were to do that, I would have to have a minimum lot area of 1,000 square feet, not 3,500. And if you go back and look at the intent of the overlay, it says in it, we intend to allow more density with this overlay. And they do it right here. It went from 3,500 in CBD down to 1,000. The 3,500 in CBD doesn't apply to me in any way, shape, or form. Then the letter I got from the city said that the 3,500 applied, and I can't be more than 10,000 square feet of commercial. And they cited in their letter, that's coming from, again, the base, that's referencing a different zone, CN, and in that, anything that was a use in CN could be used in CBD, but with the limitation of 10,000 square feet. A hotel is not even in CN. A hotel's not allowed in CN. It does not become a permitted use until you get to CBD. So there is nothing that's telling me that's pertinent to my project. What they didn't cite, and what I think maybe they're saying now, but I'm not sure, is that in the CBD, there is a 10,000 square foot building area. Maybe that's what they're talking about, for commercial. But the problem with that is, that's not captured when you get to the overlay. In the overlay, it says, only building area comment is retail establishments, which are individual stores, cannot be more than 5,000 square feet. Why are they doing that? That's the only place that exists, because they took away the 10,000 square foot limitation. And they knew they were taking away it, and they thought, well, now we've said you can build a lot of commercial downtown, but we don't want big boxes. We don't want somebody to waltz in here and do a 20,000 square foot furniture store. So we are going to make sure we keep that from happening, because we've taken away the 10,000 by saying you can only do 5,000 in each one. Mr. Rodriguez just said, oh my goodness, she's got 6,901 square feet of commercial retail in the building across the street in Square 5. I have that much allowed, but I don't intend to rent that out to anybody at 6,900 square feet. I know what the rules are. I have to chop that into individual stores so that I don't go over the rule. Have every intention of that. The retail spaces in the hotel are all well under 5,000 each. So there's not a problem, with any of this. The next thing, so now we go to the CBD, and this is what they're relying on. And here you see the 10,000, the 3,500 has to do with residential uses, not mixed uses. So this is where they're getting it. But they just didn't turn the page and look at the effect that the overlay has had on these rules. And this ordinance tells us how we're supposed to interpret. It tells us, what do we do if the base zoning is a little different from the overlay zoning? When you finish reading CBD in the ordinance, there's some other areas, but you eventually get to MU, section 3.30. This is where the tool of mixed use is created. And in this ordinance, this part of the ordinance, it tells us that standards relating to minimum lot areas, lot widths, lot coverage, maximum heights shall be required as in the base zone unless otherwise noted. Unless otherwise noted. And a perfect example of that is, just like they shouldn't be allowed to only look at CBD and pretend like the other parts don't exist, I can't just look at overlay and pretend that's the end of my inquiry. If I did that, I would see that in the overlay, there is absolutely no mention of height requirements, none. So can I build a 10-story building? No, because this tells me I have to go back then and see if there's a height requirement in the underlying. And if there is, I have to follow that. If there's not, I can build a 10-story building. This is the rules of interpretation. And, you know, the one part of this code that I don't necessarily agree with as a lawyer, because it introduces some subjectivity, is the underlined portion that says, you know, even if a project doesn't check every box, the city, on its own, without me asking for a variance or anything, can approve it if it's determined that it's a good project, that it fits. So, you know, you could do that. I don't really think you should for that reason. My project checks every box. And this is not a head scratcher. Then you get to that other ordinance that I just showed you creates the procedure for the city to use to create overlay districts, which the city did at the exact same moment that it passed this zoning ordinance in 2010. And it tells you right here that, you know, we're wanting to relax some of these underlying requirements because we realize there's going to be greater density. The other really important thing that you have to understand about this, that absolutely proves that no one intended the application that they're making, no one in 14 years has ever applied it to say what they're saying. You know why we know this? Because I sent a records request recently. Give me the list of all the non-conforming buildings downtown. There's none. First they said there was a list and there's no list, but I'm telling you, if there was a list, property owners need to know that. The parish can tell you like that. I've asked that question about properties I was about to buy next to something. How is this non-conforming? Nobody wants to be a non-conforming use because that means that the minute that new ordinance came into place, if you are different, they can't kick you out, they can't take your property, but they can tell you, yeah, you're grandfathered in, but let a hurricane come or a fire or something, and you don't have this building in use for 6 months, it's over. You can't continue to use it. And in the meantime, you can't add 1 square foot to it. It is what it is. There are so many buildings, and I'm going to show you a slide in a minute, downtown that exceed 10,000 square feet. There are so many mixed use downtown that had been there, going back to H.J. Smith's. H.J. Smith's in 2010 would have been deemed non-conforming. Not to mention, they actually were a mixed use because they have a residence behind the store that a lot of people don't know about. It's been there since the late 1800s. They were doing mixed use before the rest of us even knew what it was. And the purpose of this code is to make sure that we hang on to what we have and continue to build on it, not to try to shrink it, not to say to Jerry Braswell, who has a 14,000 square foot building that has St. John's Coffee House in it, you're non-conforming. We just went through an entire zoning, comprehensive rezoning, and we decided to make half this town non-conforming. Aquista Pays, the Southern Hotel. I got a building permit in 2013 under this exact same code to build a 41,000 square foot hotel. Nobody said, gee whiz, you can only do 10,000 square feet. That building would have been torn down because it would have no use if we interpreted the code back then the way they're interpreting it today. In 2015, Paul Swain has a 60 by 120 lot, that's 7,200 square feet on Columbia Street. He has 2 commercial establishments, 5 residential units. 2 of those units were built in 2015 with a building permit. No way, under their interpretation, he should only at most have 2 residential units. He's not the only one who has properties, mixed-use properties downtown that greatly exceed. That Florida Street, at 420 Florida, it's got 2 offices and 12 condos on a 30,000 square foot lot. According to what they're telling me today, that would have to be a 42,000 square foot lot for those condos to be legal. Those condos were there in 2010, and they're not non-conforming. So how are they legal? And what I'm trying to do somehow is not. You can't even make sense of it. So this is where I've just kind of compared the pertinent parts of the base with the overlay. And here's the problem I think they're having, maybe. You can't look at these requirements side by side as though they're equal. The overlay is on top. And when it changes what's down here, it becomes the rule for that part that's been changed. There's other parts in the overlay that talk about landscaping and the sign, and it'll say, well, we're going to tweak that for the historic, but everything else should still be applied. They don't say that on the 10,000 square foot because that was not the intent. And that wouldn't even make sense when you look at what the whole goal of this ordinance was. And to ask or think that the answer is to get a PUD, there are no PUDs in the historic district. A PUD is a weird word for spot zoning. And when they kept pressuring me to go that route, which would have added a ton of uncertainty and delays, I kept saying, you know, I'm not going to acquiesce that you're right, because you're not. And that would set a very dangerous precedent, not just for my project, but for every owner downtown and every project behind me. And lo and behold, the project that's being drawn right now across the street where the Star Theater was, is 13,000 square feet. So I told Andrew and Patrick McMath, you guys better trot down to City Hall and find out if you're going to get a building permit. And guess what they were told? No, but just get a PUD. Just go get a PUD. If everybody does that, we're going to be just like Mandeville. If every single project has to be, go to the city council, and everybody wants to do their own special tweaks, and, well, while I'm here, how about I don't have to be 42 feet high? How about you give me another floor? That's a PUD. That's when you ask for whatever. If you do that, you can throw the zoning code away, because every certainty, every purpose has just been thrown away, and none of us know what's going to be built next door. None of us know anything. So the interesting thing is, like I told you, I was constantly bringing these projects to the city as they were being developed, on saying, hey, this is how we calculated the height requirements. You agree, disagree? And this was an ongoing conversation. Nikita Bagby was our planner there. She served in that capacity for 21 years, until she retired last year. She actually has the credentials and the diplomas to serve as the head of planning and zoning, because she was a planner, she was a youth person. And I sent Nikita this email in October saying, hey, these are almost finished plans. Please look at them and tell me if I have any issues. The very next day, Nikita sends me, and you all have a copy there because this is going to be hard for you to read. And guess what analysis she used? The exact same analysis that I am using, that my architects have used. Everybody who's worked on this project has used the exact same analysis. What's going on? And she looks at it and she says, yep, you're mixed use, no minimum, look at that, complies, complies, complies. Every single aspect of the ordinance that applies to my building, she determined fit. There's no mention of 10,000. There's no mention of 3,500 square feet. She does have a question on the next page, because at that point, I was thinking about townhomes in that back building rather than condos. And so she asked the question, which makes sense, hey, is that on a separate lot? Because if it's a separate lot and only residential, then the 1,000 square feet apply. Right? She got it. She was here in 2010. She was the city's face to the entire comprehensive rezoning. And this was her determination in 2021, and what I am building today has not changed in any relevant way from what she told me. So I got the green light to keep spending money, to keep building. I have that green light for a mixed use. Now I know what I can do for the hotel. And then, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, somebody just decided, I don't know what. If you want to also look, this is something my architects did, and I also gave you a copy because this could be hard to read for you. But you know, they're looking at existing buildings downtown that are over 10,000 square feet. And you can see, and then they compare it to the lot size. But, you know, that's 12 buildings right there. That's not everything. I don't think that that's Heritage Bank. That's 16. Oh, yeah, it's on there. Aquista Pace is not on there. Do you really think in 2010 that it was the intention of our city council and the people who participated in this drafting of this thing to make our grocery store non-conforming? No. No. No one has ever, in 14 years, interpreted this code this way. And if you don't straighten this out, if you rule that, oh yeah, nobody can do more than 10,000 square feet, and that becomes the rule, then the Southern Hotel is non-conforming, Jerry's properties, bunch of properties downtown are all non-conforming. And God forbid we have a hurricane, and people can't keep their businesses going for more than 6 months, because we'll have a whole different town come back. And nobody intended for us to be a town that you, no matter what your lot size is, no matter what your lot size is, all you can build is 10,000 square feet of commercial. So Harvey Marsland now has 5 lots. Now, I don't know, maybe he could sell it to 5 different people, and they could each put 10,000 square feet on it, and we'd have 50,000 square feet right there. But if he sells it to one person, and they want to do a development, it can only be in 10,000 square feet. There's no way that this code should be interpreted like that. So I'm sorry, I'm a little passionate about this issue. But I am very happy to answer any questions. Also, like I said, my architects are here if there's any questions for them.
You said that the hurricane comes through the town, it would change it if we don't do what you're suggesting. I don't understand what that means.
So if they are right, or if going back to 2010, when this ordinance was done, any property more than 10,000 square feet of commercial, like they're now saying, or that had more residential in a mixed use, or even just residential, that didn't fit that 3,500 square foot rule that they're applying, would have been non-conforming. It would be, you can't make people sell it or shut it down, but if something happens and it's no longer used, then for 6 months, it loses that non-conforming grandfathered status and becomes illegal. So if Jerry had to, for whatever reason, shut down that building on the corner where the coffee shop is, and his contractor goes to Mexico, and whatever he was trying to get done takes him 7 months instead of 6, the city would have the right to say, oh, well, whatever you're doing, you can only redevelop 10,000 square feet of it. Those other 4,000 square feet, it don't have a value. They don't have a use. This is such an impact on people's property rights for no reason. We have a perfectly clear, good code that everyone has abided, and because of it, I did a 41,000 square foot hotel. Because of it, the people across the street from me, where the Star Theater, are trying to put a 13,000 square foot building that will have an office, a retail spot, a restaurant, a wine bar. That's exactly the kind of growth this code was trying to foster, but at the same time keep the cohesiveness of our downtown community. So we're not allowing somebody to come put a 20-story building in. Of course not. But we're also not trying to go in the opposite direction and say that you can't do this, and to suggest that 5,000 square foot for a retail establishment, I got a 25,000 square foot lot. Do you mean I could only do 5,000 square feet of retail? No, I could do 20,000 square feet of retail. I just have to chop it into 5,000 square foot blocks. It's common sense. Nobody wants to have a non-conforming property. It's a risky, worrisome place to be. And nobody in this town right now, nobody does. And we all have businesses that are bigger than 10,000 square feet, that have more residential density than the 3,500 square feet they're talking about. That works fine on those few little lots that aren't, aren't under the overlay, but not downtown. That's the whole reason we have an overlay, is this right here we're talking about. We needed to change it. They needed to make Aquistapace legal. So we enacted an overlay that made everybody's current, everything they were doing at that moment in 2010 was legal. It's still legal, except they want to say, I can't do it. And if they get away with that, that is going to impact everybody's property in here and anybody coming down the road.
Mr. Villalobos, do you have any comments you'd like to make? I would,
Lots of comments, maybe we ought to wait until.
the rest of the speakers. Anybody have any questions?
Where are the parking spaces going to be?
Where? So on the hotel project, it's interior.
Okay.
Like you're not going to see them really from the street except for when you drive under the building. So we're required to have 7. We have 22. And then for the other building, it's kind of, it's on the edges, and then some of the parking is underneath the
Building.
condos.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, we have 16 condos, we have 20 parking spaces.
Yeah, she's correct. HDC provides that there is no off-street parking requirements for commercial use, and there's one off-street parking required for each residential use. The plans meet all of that.
Okay, good.
I have questions, but some of them may be better directed to the city.
Okay.
But I read these ordinances, all of them, and spent a lot of time doing so. I didn't see anything that said that there was a size limitation on a mixed-use building. Am I missing that? Is there anything that says that?
No,
It- it-
that's the whole point.
I mean, it doesn't, I don't,
Now, I will say this, though. Actually, there is, only in that, we have a height restriction,
yes.
Yeah.
and we have parking requirements.
Sure.
So that, in and of itself, is going to impact how big a mixed use can be, because you have to incorporate those rules.
But you're not asking and don't anticipate asking for variances from any of those requirements.
The first thing I told every architect that's worked on this is, look at the code. I'm not going to ask for any favors. I don't want any variances. I know we can build what I want to build inside this code. And that's what they did.
So there may be size limitations inherent with some of the other requirements.
Right.
But there is nothing that says a mixed-use building
Right.
cannot be larger than 10,000 square feet.
Right.
I mean, does the city, is there anything that I'm missing that the city believes says in that language that a mixed-use building cannot exceed 10,000 square feet? I mean, I don't know if that's for Rod or,
I'm looking. Yeah, it says non-residential structures shall not exceed 10,000 square feet in area under the CBD underlying
mixed
zone.
use.
but this is a mixed-use building. It seems to me that there's a residential category, there's a non-residential category, and there is a third category, which is mixed use.
It's apples, oranges, and grapes.
I mean, there's a third it seems like anyway, it envisions there being a third category. And if there is a third category, then we've got to look to whether there's any limitation in the written language of the code that says that third category can't exceed a certain square footage.
It's not there.
I have a question while staff looks at that, if you don't mind, and maybe, Madam Chair, this is for you more than certainly than Lisa or the audience. But other than staff's perspective, and I respect that a great deal, do we have people here who are against this? Citizens
what
who
I
are
wanted
against
to
this?
I don't have any
I've
listing
heard-
here that I
I've heard
have.
Lisa's very thorough explanation of her proposal.
Is there a Margarita Rogers here? And are you,
One of my-
She's with the architect.
oh, you're with the architect. And the Peter Tremp, and you're an architect too. Sam, you're not, are you an architect too? Are you wanting to speak? All right, okay, so I think that answers that question.
So there's no one in
And
the
no one
audience
against?
who's here to speak against the project?
Well, this isn't about the project pro or
Again, I'm
con.
sorry, against us
Yeah,
granting a
this is
variance
about
if in
how we're
fact
going
that's
to
what we're doing.
interpret the
I
rules.
was just trying to get clarity.
No. I'm sorry?
So,
Did you fill out a card? Dash out and fill out a card and bring it to me.
sure. So you're against staff's interpretation. I hear you. Thank you. I just was trying to frame it.
And I do appreciate that I'm standing here in the unique situation that my projects are mixed use, but they're wrong about 10,000 even on commercial, and that's going to impact Patrick and Andrew and a lot of other people too. I have a unique argument in that there's no language. You're right, none. But theirs is not a mixed use. It's commercial, and a lot of those buildings that I've shown you that my architects did the takeoff are not mixed use. They're straight up commercial that greatly exceed 10,000 square feet.
On those
And-
buildings that you're mentioning right now, what is the average age of those buildings?
Oh my gosh, they go all the way from H.J. Smith
So they're probably.
all the way up to, I think Bogafalia Fitness is 13,000. That might have been 2005 or 8.
Yeah.
Heritage Bank was maybe early 2000s.
Yeah.
Here's the other question for the city.
And the Southern Hotel, I'm sorry, 2014.
Here's the other question for the city, not to get off the issue of the 10,000, because I mean, that's an important, that's one of the two objections it sounds like the city had. But the other question I have is whether the city is applying these ordinances now, either inconsistent with the way they've applied them in the past, or differently than they have applied them in the past.
Not to my knowledge.
Well, look at the Southern Hotel.
What about it?
That was an existing building.
Oh,
But it
was-
had not as a hotel. And I added to it. So even if it had been
The
somehow.
bones were there.
The bones were there, but again, it had been essentially abandoned, and certainly as a hotel, which would, if it had been non-conforming, I would not have been able to do it. That building would have had no use if it was going to be limited to 10,000 square feet. And that's the purpose of non-conforming, is to eventually weed out all that stuff that you no longer want. That's what happens. And, Peter made the comment the other day, in New Orleans, they have multiple overlay districts per lot. And they have to interpret. And non-conforming is ultimately hoping that that use or that structure goes away, because we don't want that. I think we do want all those buildings to stay, and to stay legal.
Thank you. Mr. Villalbazo, I've known you for a long time.
Yes, thank you. Steve Villavasso, 6304 Beauregard, Villavasso Associates, retired attorney, city planner for 47 years. You guys know me. I got a lot of paper over here, and I'm going to try to boil it down into 5 major topics that I tried to scribble on this piece of paper, okay? And I'm happy to answer any of the questions. Some of the details might have to be filled in with Ellen and Rod. But let me start with not my first thing, because I think everybody's kind of stuck on this non-conforming thing, okay? We wrote the 2010 ordinance. We were here before Nikita. We helped it. And the intent was not to make every building in downtown Covington illegal, non-conforming. I agree. There is a theory that a non-conforming building should come into conformance one day. That's a good planning theory. But the idea is not to mow down all the existing buildings. So the tool of a legal non-conforming process preserves what you want to preserve without changing the zoning of every parcel in downtown Covington, which was put on the table, and it really didn't work. So we came up with what we thought were the right districts, knowing that every building would not fit into the districts that we came up with, but the tool of making it legal but non-conforming, which lets it stay there, and how it was administered over the last 25 years, we'll have to, do forensics on that, but the intent was never to mow down all these buildings, okay? So this thing of legal non-conforming, I really don't think it's an issue here, but I want to get that out there, because as a professor at Loyola Law School and at UNO's graduate program, it's like pushing the button for me, okay? So, oh, and by the way, the hurricane thing, you push that button, because Hurricane Katrina taught us all about legal nonconforming. The state of Louisiana got into the business of legal nonconforming rules and passed a state law that nullified every zoning ordinance in the state of Louisiana and said every parcel has 2 years of legal nonconforming rights after Hurricane Katrina. Blatantly unconstitutional, okay, but it was Katrina, and everybody went along with it, including New Orleans and Lafayette and Baton Rouge, because nobody thought we're just going to bulldoze the 26 parishes after Katrina, because we have to rebuild those 26 parishes under their new codes, okay? So I get it. If we ever get a hurricane and you have a 6-month rule in Covington, I kind of predict that there's going to be some creativity to bring Covington back the right way, just like the state of Louisiana hammered the entire state, okay? Hopefully you don't pass unconstitutional laws when the next hurricane comes, okay? Let's talk about overlay districts. Overlay districts is sort of the heart of this whole discussion tonight, okay? An overlay district is a zoning tool that is on top of the existing zoning. The existing zoning is there, and for some reason a community decides, well, let's have an overlay district to encourage whatever you want to do. Historic district, commercial development, mixed use, whatever. It's a mixed use overlay district. That's what we want to encourage, okay? Overlay districts sometimes nullify the underlying zoning, but they have to specifically nullify the, as a matter of fact, in our code, we can see that it's not the intention of the ordinance to automatically grant exceptions, which is a clear rule that it doesn't nullify the underlying zone. So the underlying zoning is there, okay, whether it's a CBD or underlying zoning, which cumulative zoning, all other zoning under CBD as part of CBD includes RM2, which is a residential district, which is how we got to the 3,500 square feet. So the 3,500 square feet, the RM2, the CBD, is not nullified by the overlay district, okay? So that's the mechanics of an overlay district, okay? My number 3 here, PUDs. PUDs are not spot zones. That's on my exams, okay? A spot zone is a zoning category that treats one parcel different from the other parcels around it. This is the antithesis of a PUD. A PUD is a tool to see if a developer can come up with a creative approach to mixed uses, move them around a site to meet the character and intention of the community. This is exactly what a PUD does in the overlay district in downtown Covington. It doesn't create spot zones everywhere. It creates the right projects that fit in. Who decides? Not the mayor, not the city. The planning commission, a public hearing, review it, have another public hearing, let the council in their legislative authority approve the right tool to fit this new project, whatever it is, into the fabric of downtown Covington. It's not a spot zone, okay? Never intended to be a spot zone. It doesn't operate as a spot zone. Unilaterally, I go back to the word that Rod used twice in his presentation, And I think this is important because he said 2 times the staff made a determination that they could not unilaterally approve this, which, and unilaterally is his word, but my word, it's by right zoning. So here we are again. I got to tell you what by right zoning is. By right zoning is, if I have a zoning category and it lists the uses in it, and that's my zoning category, and I want to do one of those uses, it's by right. I don't have to go see Ellen, I don't have to see Rod, I don't have to see you. I just go to the building permit office and I apply for building permit. That's what unilaterally was referred to, and that's what by right zoning is. And this is not by right zoning. As a matter of fact, and this is sort of my last point, we imagine that what the proponents are arguing here tonight is correct. And so we took the 45 squares and we measured the area. I actually did it with a ruler. I didn't even use GIS, okay? And I came up with about 185 acres, and I applied the density that would result from the by right interpretation of tonight, which is 1,000 square feet per unit, okay, instead of the 3,500 square feet per unit, and that's equivalent to 44 dwelling units per acre. By the way, in the planning world, in zoning, 44 dwelling units per acre is ridiculously dense, okay? It's a dense district. So if you do the math, what you get as a unilateral right, as Mr. Rodriguez would say, or as a by right that I would say, you would get 8,000 dwelling units in the overlay district in downtown Covington if you applied this interpretation. So we can go into the details, which I'm happy to do, and we'll use the whole team to do that. But I want to end with intent. The intent of this tool is to support a project like this. I'll tell you, from a planner's perspective, this is a great project, and you just have to use the right tool. Now, the Planning Commission gets to consider it. Citizens get to say whether they like it or they don't like it. You got to show traffic plans and drainage plans. Oh, I know that's a big hassle for developers. And then the legislative body, elected by the citizens of Covington, get to vote to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. That's how it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to be 8,000 dwelling units that you just go down to the permit window and get a permit for. So I think the intent is to support these projects, good projects like this. And I'm not from Covington, you know that. I don't have a dog in the hunt, but it seems like a quality project to me, and it should stand the test of a system that Covington has in place, that Nikita helped me write, and a lot of other people were involved, Keith, Billery, all kind of crazy people. Yeah, Keith's crazy. You can quote me on that. And it's a good code, and it works. So happy to answer questions.
How long a process is that process you just described? How long a process is the process?
3 years. Oh, wait.
No, the process you described at the end, the PUD process with.
The PUD.
Yeah,
In New Orleans, it would take 3 years.
Yeah.
In Covington, it takes 4 to 6 months. 3 months.
3 months.
Well, you're right. I always
with the council meetings.
like to lower people's expectations. It's a tendency of mine. If you hit all, if.
And by the way, the administration offered to have special meetings to speed the process after the initial front application.
I have a question about the code, to your point of it being a good code, and I don't disagree with that, but it's my understanding that the administration and the city are now preparing an RFP to clean up contradictory language in the code as a result of this? Is that?
Everything you said is right except the word contradictory. There are some things in every code that have contradictions. And the code is ready for an update, and the mayor and Aaron have talked to me about this, and you're right. They are talking about doing an update. When Nikita left, by the way, some of you know this, she left a little shopping list of 30 or so things that she thinks need to be fixed, and there's other things. So yeah, there's going to be a code update, and that's normal. It's going to be the whole code.
But in the meantime,
The city, doesn't the overlay district envision a greater density?
It does.
It does.
And I think the intent is clear in here, I agree with you. And it says, it's the intention, though, it's not to automatically grant exceptions for maximum density, but it says in the next two paragraphs, find the right tool and let the city use the tool and put it through the process. That's in section 3033.2.
Well, the only section given to us in this package was the 3.3002. Is that, okay, and
Yeah, it's 002, but 003.1 and point two. Point two talks about finding the appropriate development applications and process.
would you agree then that that section, though, as I read it, clearly envisioned, or it seemed to suggest to me, it envisioned a greater density than the 1 unit per 3,500 square?
I totally agree with that. That's the intent of it, yes.
Okay. And so that may answer the other question, which was it the city's, or is it the city's position that the law, this ordinance, does not allow greater than 1 residential unit per 3,500 square feet, and that in this overlay district, and the city has absolutely no discretion to deviate or vary from that? Because I thought that's what its position was, but I'm hearing you say that that section.
My position is if you use the right tool and the city approves it, a PUD, or you could change the zoning, you could do a map change. City has the authority to do all those things.
Well, but I'm looking
then
at-
the intent is, in these three sections, 3.3002 and 3.3003, that the intent is to work with developers and to find the right tool and to find the right density.
Well, I don't see, but the language of those sections don't require that you have to go the route of a PUD in order to have a greater density. I mean,
In my opinion, it requires you find the right tool. Okay, doesn't exist, in my opinion, it doesn't exist by right in the code today. And in my opinion, the mayor doesn't have the authority to bless it automatically. And in my opinion, the only way you can do that is to go through the legislative process. And the PUD seems to be the right one, and that's what was recommended. Now, you could do a map change, and, property owners can do it, but in my opinion, I agree with the staff, it's not a by right use today.
Well, my question to that is, why does the overlay change the residential density requirement from 3,500 to 1,000?
I mean, that's a good question.
Well,
How could
I don't answer the why questions ever in a forum like that. I mean, I have to say this is really important. Why is not an issue here. It's the facts. The facts are the overlay district does not change the underlying zoning.
How can you, I'm trying to envision how a mixed-use building necessarily means it will have residential, mixed with non-residential.
I would agree with
You
that.
have to have, I mean, for it to be mixed use, it's got to have residential in it. And this says you can do that, and there is no lot size requirement. No minimum lots area is required for that. So I'm trying to understand how you can jive that with the
I
one
don't,
unit per 3,500.
you're assuming that the underlying zoning is nullified. And my position is it never goes away. The CBD and the R2 and the 3,500 stays there unless it's specifically overruled or exempted, and it's not in
But
this
that would
ordinance.
seem to me to say that you do have a lot size requirement. If you read it that way, then you are saying you have a lot size requirement, but this specifically says you have no lot size requirement. So I'm trying to figure out how to make those consistent.
And the mixed use rule tells you that if you do apply the base zoning doesn't go away in its entirety. You apply it unless otherwise noted. There's no, I don't know what the purpose of the overlay was, if it wasn't to change some of those requirements in CBD to reflect what was already built. That's my
I would agree unless otherwise noted, but it's not noted, and it's not specifically changed. And the best practice rule is overlay districts have to specifically have the change outlined. Not, as noted means nothing.
What does no minimum lot area required mean when you apply it to a mixed-use development? What does it mean? How can I have a residence on a 1,000-square-foot lot unless it's, you're saying I can't? You're saying I can't
You
because
can,
of the RM2?
well, our interpretation is you can if you get the right tool, and the PUD gives you the right authority.
Yeah, but, okay. All right. No,
I say the same thing over and over again, and I'm called crazy, I get that.
No, I mean, I'm trying to understand it, because I'm just reading what 3.3106 says. And it doesn't say anything about having to resort to other tools, having to change the zoning, having to resort to a PUD. It just says, for a mixed-use development, there is no minimum lot area required. So what does that, I mean, what does that mean, other than you can have more than one residential unit per 3,500 square feet?
But how much more and how many? And that's where you have to get to a law, a tool.
Okay. Well, that,
And
okay.
the tool has to come from one of the mechanisms in the code, and the right tool is the overlay.
Right.
It's not a blank check.
Well, we can't, I don't think that we, as a board, can answer the question of how many.
That's not the
units.
question for you to answer tonight anyway.
Right. As I read it, the question is there or is there not a 3,500 square foot limitation per residence, or one residence per 3,500 square feet? That's what I read this to be as one of our issues. The other is, can the mixed-use building be greater than 10,000 square feet? Those are our two issues, right?
And the staff rule,
Well, it doesn't, okay, all right, third issue.
Third issue.
That to me would be the easiest, because it doesn't say you can't have more than 5,000 commercial square footage. It just says any given retail establishment can't be
Right,
greater than
per
5,000.
retail establishment.
So those, aren't those two different?
And you know, that if I were to convert this to strictly residential, both of these units, and I would then need to look at 1B, where it
Okay.
says residential has been reduced to the 1,000 square feet. I have 25,000 square feet on one lot. I'm doing 1,600. I have 17,000 square feet on the hotel lot. I'm doing 7,000. So I don't know when me, as the citizen and the person trying to follow the rules, is gonna know that that's not the right tool. It says what it says, and I'm under. And so I don't, and I go, Nikita wrote a memo that laid it all out in 2021, exactly what we are supposed to be governed by in this situation. She went through it, she was our planner, certified planner, 21 years, and she only looked at what we've been talking about tonight and said, complies, complies, complies. So
Listen, let me interrupt her, because that's not accurate. I'm for this project, I will tell you that, but what she's representing, Nikita said, is not accurate. Look at what Nikita said. On approving the retail space, that plan was for 4,000 square feet.
Right, it wasn't the same.
6,500
It wasn't the
square feet.
same.
Not the same plan. Additionally, that plan had 7 condos, not 16.
Right.
For purposes of argument.
But she's
That was
using,
not the same plan that Nikita looked at, and I don't want it represented that Nikita approved the plan that you're looking at.
Right.
tonight.
I could see
Other than
that.
I have no problem with this project, y'all. We're just trying to
that's not the.
To interpret the law.
What rules did Nikita turn to? What was the rule that she used
Well-
to judge
Well, let's read what the law says, okay? Let's read what 3.3002 says. The title is Limitations on the Flexibility of Mixed-Use Overlay Districts. It is not the intention of this ordinance to automatically grant exceptions or maximum density increases for mixed-use overlay districts. I'm going to skip the next phrase, and I'm going to go to the end because this is the punchline. Therefore, the city may require, as a condition of approval, any reasonable condition, comma, limitation or design factor, comma, pursuant that will promote proper development of a mixed-use development. It can't be any clearer than that, and it's in the law. This is the law. The four corners of this piece of paper is not intent, it's the law of the city of Covington.
It is, let me ask you this, so it clearly envisions that there can be greater density.
It wants greater density, but it wants the right tool.
Okay, let me ask you this. It may require, as a condition of approval, any reasonable condition. Is a requirement of a change in zoning? Because that's what a PUD
bet.
would be a change.
Or
Is
it could
that
be a conditional use permit, which is a change.
Is that a reasonable condition to require a change of zoning?
In every community we work in throughout the state of Louisiana, that is a reasonable tool and a reasonable condition. Condition triggers the word conditional use permit. You know what a conditional use permit is? It's a change in zoning. You know what a special use permit is? It's a change in zoning. You know what a PUD is? It's a change in zoning. I'm not afraid of change in zoning. PUDs give you a lot of specific. If I walk up here and say, I just want to change my zoning from single-family residential to regional commercial, you're going to turn me down. You know, because I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm going to put a Walmart there, okay? But if I tell you I want to put a PUD there, I'm going to give you great pictures, I'm going to tell you the density, I'm going to do all the bells and whistles, and I'm going to show you a great project, and then it becomes a reasonable condition. This is the law. We're not interpreting this paragraph. Nikita wrote this paragraph.
That's the law. I'm sorry, what?
It doesn't apply to this situation because the zoning that is there, I am minor, I am actually not even skirting the edge of it. I'm not asking for anything that's not already written in the overlay and the CR. In every way, this project does not need me to ask council, planning and zoning, because there's already a rule. It's not a suggestion. It's in the zoning. And me and my architects followed it to the
Madam Chair, I want to make a comment. It's not a question, but I feel like from a staff perspective, we've heard a lot about the word intent. And if we're going to use intent as the basis for interpreting some of the law, then I think in all fairness, we need to use intent on the other side of this too. And I think anyone who knows the history of what, other than this project, but certainly including these two projects, what Lisa and her team have done in this city, feel like we're going to go letter of the law, spirit of the law. If intent's going to count over here, then intent's going to count over here. And I think we all have to be very reasonable, logical thinkers about this. And while I am sure there is a mechanism to ask Lisa to go back to further steps in a bureaucratic process to ultimately arrive at what we believe will be many believe will be the exact same place. I think we should be logical, reasonable people on the intent side of this conversation and say, when individuals in this community are willing to be responsible, they're willing to be pragmatic, they're willing to invest their own capital to take a risk on our city, that driving density in a downtown is what in fact creates a vibrant downtown, and all the other property owners and restaurant owners and retail establishments want that. There's a level of logic that has to be applied here if we are in fact going to apply intent. And I think that's a very important point for us all to consider.
And she has a track record. She has a track record.
Lisa has run this project. I've been on this board 3 months, so this clearly has nothing to do with any role here. Lisa has run this project by everyone in the city who was willing to talk to her, who was willing to give her feedback, who was willing to make it better. That's staff, that's public citizens, that's other owners, that's other property developers, that's every partner who would sit at a table and say, how should it look? What could it be? What is the highest and best use of my property and my money? That's what Lisa has done with this. So for us to be letter of the law difficult, I think is unfair and burdensome.
I'm just wondering why it took so long for this to come to fruition right now. How long have you owned the property?
I started work on this certified in 2017. I probably didn't get it to a place where there was enough for the city to start commenting until 2018, 2019. I was asking, how's this height calculation? I just showed them pictures and said, hey, look at all these balconies hanging over the sidewalk. Can I do that? You know, I mean, it's been transparent.
I think he wants you to speak into the microphone, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's been a transparent.
He was waving at me, I didn't know what he
I'm
was
sorry.
waving about.
It's been a transparent, as I could make it, process, because that's in my best interest. You know, I've spent $1 million getting these two projects to the place that they are right now. Most of that money was spent, I don't know, since 2021. And while that project was slightly different, what Nikita looked at, it was 4 townhomes, it was a number of condos, it was the retail. But my point in what she understood and led me to also believe was, what part of the code are we supposed to be applying here? What part do I have to stay under? And from that moment on, I felt like I'm on the right track, so let me go spend a bunch more money and go through the HDC 4 times. Always approved. Staff is, my architects came over this fall and had a work session with the Historic District Commission, again, to say, any tweaks, any suggestions, how can we make it better? Ellen was at that meeting. We also had work sessions on the other one, and at no time did anybody say, and I think I was always saying everything about it, but at no time did somebody say, oh, by the way, how many condos is that? You know, and will that 25 rooms fit into 10,000 square feet? You know, I'm blindsided at this point. And I just would ask that you order the city to grant my building permit for Summer House, because it's sitting there, ready to go. I'm ready to break ground and remove this impediment so that I can go forward and finish Square 5.
I would like to make some comments, okay? Yes, I was at the CHDC meeting. CHDC meetings review the, can you hear me? Okay,
No.
I don't usually talk. The CHDC meetings review the exterior and some other things. They don't look at the interior, the number of condos, the number of units, the retail space. That's not what we look at the Historic Commission workshops. At the time that we got ready to review this at the Historic Commission, the latest one, because plans were presented to Nikita in 2021, and then it kind of like nothing else seemed to have happened after that. So the plans that were originally submitted, which were not plans with the density that are submitted now, were in 2021 different. The ones that we looked at last year that the Historic Commission reviewed, at that time is when I asked Lisa's organization, wait, how many condos are we talking about? How many? So as soon as I found that out, that's when I reviewed the density question and brought it to everybody's attention. Up until then, I had no idea that we had changed, that the density had increased, okay? And as for the hotel project, that was submitted, the plans for that was submitted, I think, mid-November, I want to say the 15th, late in the day. And as soon as they were submitted, we started reviewing them, and they had the same density problem. It's not like everybody sat on this for years and didn't comment. As soon as these things were brought to our attention, they were commented on, and it's not wasted time. It's there for a reason, because if somebody comes into Covington, you know, we're lucky right now. Lisa's projects are beyond beautiful. The Star, it's going to be wonderful, and that's great. But when you start opening doors for people to increase density and to do things without having to go to public hearing and without having to present things to the citizens of Covington, I think it opens a very, very dangerous door. And I have fallen in love with this city, and I just would hate to see Nikita's work of 20 years just disintegrate. Because if you look at Covington 20 years ago, it was not the Covington of today. It was not. I wasn't here, but I've seen pictures, and there was a lot of work and a lot of time that everybody put in way before I was ever here. And Lisa's Hotel is a turning point, I think, for the city historically, for our Historic Commission. Nobody's criticizing that. Nobody's criticizing the projects. This is a density problem. This is a density issue, and as I review this plan, it has to go before a public hearing in order for it to meet the code standards. And that's all we're asking you to do. And I appreciate you listening, and thank you for bringing my name in so I could comment. So thank you.
When was the last time a PUD was approved in the city of Covington?
There's a PUD on Highway 25, the old driving range is a PUD, Ronald Reagan Apartments is a PUD.
Right. Ricky.
What's the subdivision on 21st Avenue?
The Groves, the Groves is a
The
PUD.
Groves is a PUD.
The,
Weren't there some moratoriums?
No, we've never.
Not in the city,
we've
in the
never had a
parish.
moratorium in Covington.
In the parish, though.
And there were PUDs applied for, my understanding, prior to the 2010 zoning code change, and they didn't have to be applied for because of things that went into place in the code that let projects like that be done at the time. Before, I don't know, that was all before me.
Barclay
yes.
Park is a PUD.
Oh, which one is it?
Ellen, can I just ask a question about the public hearing piece? So you said you think we should go before a public hearing in a different process.
Well, that's
to
the
get- sure,
process. Yes,
Exactly,
ma'am.
I hear you. But for our roles, if you will, what we are conditioned here to do, would the public hearing process be any different? This was advertised, correct?
Yes, but this is advertised as an appeal to my decision. It's not to review the project, it's not to review the density, it's not to review the footprint of the project or anything. It's simply to appeal my decision as a city employee for
As it-
this to
as
go
it
to the
relates
next
to the process.
stage. Yes, ma'am. So when it goes before the zoning commission will see a full layout of what's proposed. The citizens get to see what's proposed, and I think they're all going to be very happy with it. It's just a process that's in place to make sure that everybody understands these things that are just a little different than what the code allows.
From a planning perspective, do you have an issue with the density of either one of these two projects?
My job is what I do is I have to interpret the code and apply the code, what I think about the project.
Okay.
Listen, again, I'm for the project. I think the project can be approved if it goes through the process. The issue the staff has is one of degree. Okay, we got this project here, and it's got 2.5 times the permitted density of the underlying CBD. She carte blanche approve that? What if it's 10 times the density? What if it's 1.5 times the density? What is the staff's role in making this interpretation? It's the fear of her taking a position on something and then being criticized, saying, well, where do you think you get the authority to give approval to a plan that's 5 times what the code provides for, when you didn't have a public hearing, and you didn't go before the zoning commission, and you didn't let the city council review it. You just, she's in a box. Where does she draw the line? She's not against this project. It's where is that line where you say, oh, well, I can just make a reasonable accommodation. I'll tell her to set it back another foot off the road. Well, her problem is, where is the extent of her authority that's not set forth in the code? And the course of action she took was to pursue a public hearing in front of the zoning commission, who has the power to review this stuff and not make it a staff decision. That's the path she chose. You certainly have a right to say, oh, we disagree with your interpretation, and we uphold the appeal of the decision of the planning staff, a decision, and we say the project doesn't need a PUD. That's fine. Or you say that we deny the appeal. I make a motion to deny the appeal and require that you go in front of the zoning commission. This is totally a procedural matter that the staff is trying to resolve. That's why they're before you.
Okay.
Then if it's that simple, I make a motion that we approve the appeal and move on with her to vote. And do we do both of them, or do we need to do the 2 case votes separately?
You got to do
separate
each
motions.
one of them.
2 separate motions.
So, yeah, you're going to make a motion to uphold the appeal and reverse the decision of the planning staff. That's what you need to do.
So moved. On case number 2.
One.
Well,
Yeah,
Two on the agenda.
Yeah, oh, 2, okay. First of her cases. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Roll call.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Huval?
Yes.
Ms. Bourgeois?
yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Second on the docket is case number 24-01-03 BOA, requesting the Board of Adjustment review the City of Covington interpretation of the requirements of Section 3.31 of the zoning ordinance and order the city to change its interpretation of same. Proposed multi-use development to be located at the northwest corner of North New Hampshire and Gibson Streets, having the municipal address of 353 North New Hampshire in the Division of St. John, Covington, Louisiana. The petitioner is the Condrey Southern Hotel LLC. What do we do?
Need a motion.
A motion.
No, you got to repeat the same motion.
Go for it.
I make a motion to approve the appeal brought by the petitioner to the permit department, or to the planning department's decision on case number 2.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Roll call.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Huval?
Yes.
Ms. Bourgeois?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other?
Tell the Star Theater people to withdraw their PUD application, and they can do whatever.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the lawsuit, and I won't be named. Other business? None of other business?
Please do your ethics training,
I already did it.
okay? And we have a meeting on February 20th.